The only people who could be priests were people of the tribe of what? Levi. So they would offer up sacrifices to God. So very rarely would people die plowing in the field. Very rarely would people die picking corn. But a Levite, a priest, if he went to the tabernacle and he was not dressed a certain way, he would drop dead before the presence of God. It was a dangerous job to be a priest in that time. You had to have everything in order. You had to come covered in blood. It was messy. It was gory. They would fling blood everywhere in front of the tent and in front of the veil that separated the holy place from the holiest of holies. They would come in and they would have to deal with the livestock. They would be the ones to take the knife and go across the cow's neck with the knife, and all the blood gush out. It was the Levites. To him much is given, much is required. Yes, they didn't have to go and plow in the field. They didn't have to go and pick corn, but they did have to take the bullock and the heifer and the ram and the goat, and they had to kill it and throw blood everywhere. And if they were not where they needed to be, they would fall dead. They could literally lose their lives serving in the temple of God. So God said, no, you don't need to be doing that. I'll take care of you through the other tribes. So this means that as long as the 11 tribes were blessing the one, God was blessing the 11 tribes. Right. There's some principles in here that we're going to pull out here in a moment. And if you say amen to this, you got to say amen to the New Testament principle. Because under the Old Testament, giving was based on God's standard. In the New Testament, giving is based on God's character.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we got to get back to this. Okay, verse number 21, 23, read them.
But the Levites shall do the service of the tabernacle of the congregation.
And
they shall bear their iniquity. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations.
Read.
And among the children of Israel, they have no inheritance. But the tithes of the children of Israel.
Now watch this. The tithe of the children of Israel,
which they offer as a heave
offering,
I have given to the Levites.
I have given to the Levites to inherit. Meaning, when you take that in, that's going to the Levites. Read.
Therefore, I have said unto them, among the children of Israel, they shall have no inheritance.
Okay, that's why they don't have an inheritance. It's checks and balances. They don't get a part of the land, but you do get 10% of every part of the heave offering that you all bring in. That's what God said. But not only that, but it was even less money that they had, or less funds that they had, or less offering that they had, because if you look at verse 26, those Levites had to take care of the priests.
Right.
So they had to take a tenth of the tenth they got and give it to the priest. So even the Levites had to give. Even the Levites had to give. Even the people serving in the temple, doing service for the Lord, y'all don't see that principle, had to give. Just because they served in the temple didn't mean they didn't have to give. And they had to give the same amount. Okay? So what happened was, during Nehemiah's day, watch this, watch these principles. The wall of Jerusalem was broken down. And people were having a hard time. They were having a hard time. Look at Nehemiah 13, verse 10. Let's see what happened when they had a hard time. I want you to get this. That's where the 10th come from, okay? They gave the 10th. And later they gave, if you keep reading, you find they gave, the 10th was also for people who were in need, widows and fatherless and strangers. That 10% went to help them. That's where that was a 10th. That was under the Old Testament. Okay? But look what happens in Nehemiah chapter 13 at around verse number 10. Because I believe when you know better, you need to do better. I believe that there's some people that just don't know how to give. They don't know what they're supposed to give. So they tease. They tease. It's almost like there's no planning. You just whatever you have in your pocket, you just put in there. Because you don't really understand the spiritual aspect, and you don't understand the theological teaching of giving, and you don't really understand the spiritual benefit of doing this. All right? So we're going to take how they did it under God's standard. We're going to take those principles and apply them to how they do it under God's character.
Yeah.
But Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 10, what does the Bible say?
And I perceived that the portions of the Levites had not been given them.
Okay, so watch this. This is during the time when the children of Israel were going through captivity. Their enemy had seized them. The wall of Jerusalem was broken down, and Nehemiah went back in there to try to rebuild the wall. And he says, I perceived that what?
The portions of the Levites.
The portion of the Levites
had not been given them.
Now, what does that mean? Based upon what you know about the Levites, what does that mean? If the portion of the Levites had not been given to them, it means that something was going undone. Read what else it says. Watch this.
For the Levites and the singers.
For the Levites and the singers that did the work were what?
Were fled every one to his field.
They were working in the field. We just read that God said, I'm not giving the Levites any inheritance in the land. I don't want them in the field working and doing all of this and trying to get the fat of the land. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the other tribes to take care of the tribe of Levi. But what happened was when times got hard, the children of Israel stopped giving a tenth. And when they stopped giving the tenth, the Levites couldn't stand in the temple and render sacrifices for the people anymore, because guess what? They had to eat too. So they had to go to the field, take off their priestly garments, and you had priests in the field plowing and plucking. And Nehemiah went back in to restore how God set it up. Look at the next verse.
Then contended I with the rulers and said,
what did it say?
Why is this house of
God
forsaken?
He didn't say, why are the Levites forsaken?
Why is
the house of God forsaken? Do you know why? Because who had the responsibility of ministering to the house of God? The Levites. How were they going to do it? Based upon receiving a tenth of everything the 11 tribes took up. The tribes stopped. The 10th stopped the work. And it wasn't about making a Levite rich. To those of you who've been in experiences where they just hammer you for money, hammer you for money, hammer you for money. God told me to tell you that if you plant a fourfold seed, you'll get a fourfold harvest. And these guys that get on TV talking about, well, the Lord is telling me that to tell you that if you sow a seed into this and send $52 a month, God is going to bless you with 100-fold increase. That, let me tell you, bullcorn. It ain't about a person. It's about the work of the Lord. And that's why I've got a problem when people start using terminology like we hired a preacher. We hired a secretary. No, you're not. It ain't about hiring. You're supporting the work of the ministry. When you think carnal-minded, when you think like the world, you start using that terminology. But what you need to understand is it's not about hiring a person and paying people. I would for the day when our elders can be told, give your job 2 weeks notice, because you cannot be an effective elder trying to hold down a 9 to 5. Your job is to serve in the work of the Lord, and the only way you can do that is to be available to check up on the sheep. When we start understanding the principles. Does that make sense? It's not trying to make somebody's pocket fat or make somebody rich so that I can fly from one church to another. The bigger picture is that God's work must be done. And somebody's got to be available to do God's work.